Hi, I'm Graeme Codrington from Tomorrow Today Global, and this is our review of 2020. We're doing that in 5 questions. This is the second question. Why did some countries do better than others? This is a really interesting question for me to ask, as I live and work out of Johannesburg, South Africa, and of course the African continent was expected to be massively hard hit by COVID. And at this stage, December 2020, it appears as if Africa has done better than pretty much any other continent in terms of just naturally being able to deal with COVID. Now, that's not necessarily because Africa has done anything different. Other countries around the world, other places around the world, especially Southeast Asia, Asia Pacific, focused on track and trace and quarantine rather than specifically locking down. They locked down borders. I'm thinking South Korea, Vietnam, Japan, Australia, New Zealand as examples of countries that kind of locked down their borders and then did quite a lot of track and trace internally. Countries like the Philippines, like Thailand, Malaysia went for a more lockdown approach, and those tended to work. In Africa, you had lockdowns in some countries, but you would have expected still a much harder hit. And I think the medical professionals are a little bit confounded by this. There have been some thoughts that it could be that a lot of African countries do a lot of childhood vaccinations, including particular vaccinations that are intended to help against TB, for example, that might provide some assistance in your body protecting itself from other coronaviruses and sort of flu-like symptoms. It might be because we get a lot of flu in the system. This has been another suggestion, that countries and regions where flu is in the system every year, we have built up although coronavirus and flu are different viruses, they're kind of, if you like, in the same WhatsApp group. And it might be. These are all just suggestions at the moment. Science is kind of trying to catch up and do research to try and work this out. It could be that we just get a lot more vitamin D in Africa. That literally could be from the sunshine. It could be from the pallor of skins. I know I'm a white African, so I shouldn't be talking too much about this, but maybe people with darker skin tones have more vitamin D. There might be other things in the systems. Again, we don't know, so I'm not presenting these as facts. I'm just saying these are the questions, the things that people are asking. And one final one is, in fact, there are 2 others that are interesting. The one is altitude. A lot of Africa is really high up. I live in Johannesburg, which is a mile above sea level. Which I think certainly impacts us physically in certain ways. It's what makes the Kenyan athletes brilliant long distance runners and so on, being born and training at altitude. Maybe that has an effect. And then finally, it could just be that we don't live in a sanitized world. And I don't mean that disrespectfully, but we kind of just, we don't sanitize every surface all the time. We kind of just get on with it. And maybe we have stronger immune systems just because of the way we live and how we live and where we live. Who knows? I think it's going to be fascinating in the future for science to kind of investigate all of this and have a look at what these reasons might be. But that kind of brings me to the point of this second review, and that is that we have seen science working in real time in 2020. I think we tend to marvel at scientists of all stripes, in the healthcare, in transportation, in engineering. Our world is driven by super smart people working on very super smart things all of the time. And out of that emerge inventions and creations and advances in technology and in society that what a wonderful time to be alive. The last few decades, as we shoot into this digital era and feel like we're rushing towards the future. I think we've discovered in 2020 that science is chaotic in the way that it works. And in fact, we know this. The scientific method is a method that requires people to just have innovative, creative, even outlandish ideas. You put it out as a thing that you want to test in the world. The scientific method asks it to be falsifiable so that we can prove it right or wrong. The scientific method asks it to be repeatable so that other people can repeat the same experiments that you're doing and check whether they get the same results and work out what the conditions are to get the results that you want. And that's science. But science doesn't move in a straight line. Science tries stuff and then it discovers that's a dead end, and then it discovers that's a complete mistake and that's wrong. And the best scientists love to be proven wrong. Not in the moment. They've all got egos and all the rest, of course. But if they put something out there and they think they've understood something and then somebody else says, no, you got it wrong, that's the only way new knowledge develops. The problem is that because of the trying to develop vaccines, because of trying to understand COVID, we've been watching science unfold in real time. So we've been watching scientists fight with each other. We've been watching people come out with an idea and then other people contradict them. And the problem is that when people put out an idea these days and then they publish it on the internet, then that sticks in history as if it was a fact forever, even when later it is disproved. So, for example, fairly early on, you had a whole group of people saying lockdowns are absolutely the worst thing that you can do. And some of these people quoted scientists and quoted it as if it were fact. Now, I don't know how you can claim it to be fact, because nobody had ever done lockdowns before in significant ways, and we didn't have any precedents for it. So it was really great that Sweden, for example, decided not to. The UK decided not to early on. Sweden pushed through the furthest in terms of a country making a scientific-based decision to experiment with herd immunity and not locking down. But as the year has progressed, we've worked out what works better and what doesn't. Strict lockdown, but without tracking and tracing, is not as effective as track and trace. So you can ease up on the lockdown as long as you're tracking and tracing, as long as you're quarantining. Testing is important, but some tests work better than others. We've learned all of this during the year. And it's still way too early to pronounce definitively one way or the other. But the biggest thing that we've seen is that your ideology determines which facts you accept. And this is something that people are finding difficult, is that there are facts on all sides. Technically, that can't actually be right. What we should really be saying is there are theories on all sides, and someday we'll work out which theory is the most connected to reality, which theory is correct. But we might also discover there are different ways to getting the same outcome, and we have choices and options available to us. All of this has been happening in real time. So this might seem like a strange answer to the question, why did some countries do better than others? But I think it's the right answer. You see, I don't think that it was about what countries did, because we can find an example of every possible alternative option, from ignoring the virus and pretending it doesn't exist like the Tanzanian president did, to crazy talk about vaccines turning you into crocodiles like Bolsonaro in Brazil is doing at the moment, to strict lockdowns that sort of eased in and eased out of lockdown like the UK has done, to locking off your borders and creating a bubble in your whole country like New Zealand did. There's so much variation of what we did, but what determined which countries did better and worse is not so much the decision they made, but I think three things. The first is, did they rely on science? And yes, scientists have got different views. And so you might have to pick which scientists you rely on. But those countries that chose to rely on scientists rather than politicians, that chose to at least choose a set of facts, even if other facts were available, but they chose a particular scientific approach and tried to not let political ideology or focus groups or popular and public opinion influence them. Those who chose to try and get ideology out of the mix and just look at the facts, they did better than countries that didn't. Now, I might disagree with the set of facts that they chose, but it's tough to argue with the fact that having chosen a particular group of people to listen to and listening to the scientists, they did better than countries that didn't. I might believe that a particular set of facts leads to the best possible outcome, but as long as you are leaving your ideology at the door and listening to science as far as possible, you have done better than if you didn't. The second thing is that the countries where communication was clear and that communication was comprehensive did better than countries that didn't. So again, a country might have made a good decision, but not communicated it effectively. I think South Africa is a good example of this. I think South Africa generally made reasonably good strategic decisions. There are a lot of little bits and pieces of regulations that I think got out of hand, but strategically made mainly the right decisions. But the communication of the decisions, the communication of why things were done and how they were done was shocking and horrendous. Look then to New Zealand for the better case scenario, where almost on a daily basis there were updates when decisions had to be changed because the science was changing, because scientists were learning new things. Then the leaders, the politicians, would get out and say, here's what's changed, this is the information you need, here's a link to medical experts. In fact, here's a medical expert, let him talk about it for a little while, let her explain it to us, and then this is our decision and this is why we're doing what we're doing. And by the way, it might change again, but I will update you when it changes. You know, that level of communication has saved the day. And thirdly, I think countries that have used technology effectively. And here I'm thinking track and trace apps, I'm thinking testing and testing kits, but I'm also just thinking WhatsApp groups, websites, free dial phone numbers that you could contact, just all and any use of technology. The countries that have used technology more in terms of communication, connecting, information transfer, have done better than the countries that didn't. There are lessons there. Listen to science, even when science is competing and confusing. Choose your science and go for it, and then be prepared to follow the science and not let your ideology get in the way. Communicate clearly, transparently, comprehensively with your people, and make better use of technology. By the way, those might be brilliant lessons for you and your company to take into 2021. Yeah, this isn't just about which countries did better. I think this is also about which companies did better too, and which companies might do better in the year that lies ahead. So, that's the second question in our review of 2020. 3 more questions to come. We're going to have a look at the economy next. I hope you're enjoying this review, and I'd love to hear from you and what your experiences were of 2020 and what you think is going to be most important in setting up for 2021. Contact me via my website at graemecodrington.com or contact our team at tomorrowtodayglobal.com. We'd love to hear from you.